One sick day turned into a deadly game of lies. A game where every colleague was a potential enemy. Sick leave for one day. Morning in Jacksonville didn't look like the start of a new life, more like a rehearsal. On Drew's kitchen counter sat a mug with dried coffee. The microwave blinked 12 o'clock, though it was already 9. He perched on the edge of the bed and practiced his cough. At first it sounded too theatrical, then too pitiful. Yes, fever, The call lasted less than a minute. His boss, Bobrov, spoke in his usual corporate jargon. "Drew, your health is our KPI. Get well soon. We believe in your competencies." Drew hung up and smirked. Health KPI. Perfect slogan for a t-shirt. He slipped a windbreaker over his iron shirt. The interview had to go flawlessly. But first, the hospital. Without a doctor's note, the whole cover story would collapse. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and damp leather couches. People coughed for real, wet and heavy, and Drew felt like an imposter. He scanned the notice board. Between leaflets about blood donation and vitamin discounts hung a framed sign, "All sick notes are verified." Small print, but the meaning struck like a blow. He reached for his phone to distract himself, but a too familiar laugh broke through. He looked up, and his heart sank. Maggie, a colleague from the office, was clutching a waiting number. "Well, what a surprise," she said, then gave a cough, obviously fake. He answered, turning his eyes away. Silence hovered. Then both laughed, quietly, like accomplices. "You sick too?" Maggie asked. Fever, cough, all, as required," he mumbled, tangling his own words. She smirked again. Her gaze carried a shade of irony. Now they knew too much about each other. At that moment, Drew realized the day, meant as a step toward a new job, had already turned into a pact. And its first clause wasn't written in any contract, but in the eyes of a colleague. The next day, the office looked the same for everyone except Drew. He walked in, dropped his bag under the desk, and felt as though someone already had a hand on his shoulder. Maggie. She sat across from him, clicking her pen and casting quick glances. When their eyes met, she winked, short, like a password. Drew let out a quiet, then faked a cough. At lunch, Maggie came over herself. "How about coffee?" she asked, casually. The cafeteria smelled of burnt bacon and stale vending machine pizza. They sat by the window. "So, you won't tell anyone, right?" Drew stirred the black sludge they called coffee with a plastic spoon. "Of course not." She leaned back. "We have a joint venture, let's say." Silence stretched, broken only by the clatter of dishes. Drew felt every one of her, sort of, nailed him tighter to the table. Then Sasha appeared. Everyone called him Processes for his obsession with regulations. "Is your doctor's note legit?" he asked loudly, looking at Drew, then Maggie. "You know they check them now." Drew almost choked. Maggie smiled serenely. "Of course, everything's according to process." Satisfied, Sasha moved on, leaving behind deodorant fumes and unfinished thought. Their eyes met again. This time, both smiled. Accomplices now. The wink was no longer a joke, but an alliance. We're in this together. That evening, Just before leaving, Drew noticed a new poster in the corridor. On a white background, beside the corporate logo, "Trust is our KPI." Signed, HR Department. He stopped, staring at it, when Maggie whispered, "Sort of," behind him. He didn't answer, only muttered to himself, "Uh-huh." And he knew, from that moment, their secret had become a system, and he was part of it. It began innocently. One day, Maggie dropped a box of cookies on Drew's desk. "Hold this, and if anyone asks, say I'm in the warehouse." She tossed over her shoulder and vanished. Drew sat staring at the box when Sasha, processes, spotted it. "Oh, test purchase? Do we need to attach a report?" "Uh-huh," Drew grunted, shoving the cookies into a drawer, realizing he had just signed up as accomplice. A few days later, Maggie dropped a stack of papers on his desk. "You write reports better than me. Fill these out, will you?" "Uh-huh," he replied, though inwardly grinding his teeth. A week later, the requests sounded like commands. "Today, you'll cover me at the meeting. Say I'm leading another project. You understand." "But you don't have another project," he dared. Maggie leaned closer, eyes fixed on his. "Neither of us had a fever either." The words were quiet but sharp. Drew swallowed. "Uh-huh," slipped out automatically. Just then, Bobroff walked in, smiling as if he carried joy itself. "Colleagues, health is our strategic goal. Protect your immunity. We're planning outdoor team building." He handed each of them an apple. Drew looked at the red fruit in his palm and thought it resembled a bribe for a witness. By evening, the corporate chat was buzzing. Someone joked about colds, added thinking face. Maggie added one too, then another. Soon, there were 5. Drew replied with 6. For others, it was nothing. For the 2 of them, it was code. A secret language. "I'll cover you. We're in the same boat." And the more he typed those faces, the more trapped he felt. Every thinking face was another hook lodged deeper. By the time Drew's patience snapped, he had a plan. Not loud, not risky, but subtle, Maggie's own style. He swapped the safety template in the shared folder, adjusted access order, and moved her task label in the calendar. Small detail, but it made it look like Maggie had forgotten to validate the check. The meeting began with Bobrov's cheerful sermon. "Colleagues, processes are the foundation of trust. If processes are reliable, our KPIs are healthy." His grin made it sound like weather talk, not potential failure. "Uh-huh," Drew muttered. A few heads turned, but he bent over his laptop. When Maggie's turn came, the boss raised an eyebrow. "Where's the safety confirmation? Calendar has your name on it." Maggie scrolled, then froze. "Strange. I'm sure it was there. The template's standard." Silence filled the room. Sasha, processes, perked up. "If the template's missing, that's a violation. Critical." Bobrov nodded solemnly. "We'll mark it as a growth point. Trust is our KPI." Maggie glanced at Drew. No words, no accusation, only a narrowed look, as if she already knew. His throat went dry. Again he whispered, "Uh-huh." After the meeting, she said nothing. Worked at her desk like nothing happened. The silence was worse than threats. It meant, "She's waiting." That evening, leaving the office, Drew stopped by the wall thermometer. Numbers frozen at 36.6, neither up nor down, as if the device itself had chosen to lie for peace. He stared too long before moving on, and he knew the war had just begun. The first blow came through email. Suddenly, old chains appeared with his address in CC. He swore he'd never seen them, but it looked deliberate. Colleagues whispered while Sasha beamed. That's why regulations matter. If you're copied, you're responsible. Processes don't lie. The second strike wrecked the calendar. A client meeting showed as rescheduled, with his name listed as initiator. The client waited in vain. Babarov, still smiling. Reschedules are growth opportunities. But remember, trust is our KPI. Drew muttered, "Uh-huh," staring at the desk, while Sasha scribbled triumphantly in his My Processes notebook. The climax came at the HR well-being session. White chairs, a plate of bananas. Everyone peeled in silence, as if on cue. On the wall, transparency is our resource. Maggie bit into her banana and drawled, "Transparency, right?" Sasha jumped up. "I've collected violations. I think the auditors must see everything. It'll boost efficiency." Silence fell. Their duel had turned into someone else's career. The audit looked like a circus. 3 suited people with identical notebooks, pencils branded Trust. They jotted notes as if making grocery lists. Bobrov beamed. "Colleagues, inspection is a transparency festival. Smile. Trust is our KPI." The secretary was taken first. She murmured, "My kid's got a fever. I just mixed up the schedule." But the door closed on her words. Next came the analyst. He clutched a box with a ficus, shouting, "I have a mortgage! I did nothing wrong!" The corridor swallowed his voice. When Drew's turn came, questions landed like checklist items. Why the reschedule? Why change access? Connection with Maggie? "Uh-huh," he replied. An hour later, a board displayed the names. At the bottom, Drew and Maggie. Above them, those already erased by someone else's game. As he packed his things, Drew heard Sasha in the corridor. "I warned you. Good they cleaned it up. Now processes will shine." Maggie silently closed her own box, neatly placing a stapler and an apple inside. Silence. Only the sound of tape. The new office gleamed with glass and steel. At the entrance stood a terminal for sick note verification. Every document beeped, steady, identical, like a supermarket scanner. In the kitchen, Drew bumped into a colleague. She smiled. "Here, you can't move without paperwork, even if it's just a headache." "Uh-huh," he answered, pouring himself water, though he wasn't thirsty. That evening, he stopped in the corridor. On the wall, an electronic thermometer. Red digits glowed steady. 36.6. Always the same. From the depths of the office came another terminal beep. Drew stared at the frozen normal. Silence.